Ghost of Tsushima is the latest release from Sucker Punch, best known for the Sly Cooper and Infamous games, and is most likely the last major exclusive that will be released for the PlayStation 4. I'm Z-Slayer Dre, and there is a ton to go over in this review, so let's get right into it. There's been complaints about games made over the past few years having too long tutorials and holding the player's hand too much. Ghost of Tsushima goes the other route and throws you right into the battle immediately, even before you know the controls. After a short cutscene setting up the story where the last 80 samurai on Tsushima Island gathered to attack the invading Mongols, you were thrown right into the battle on Komoda Beach. You play as Jim Sakai, a samurai and nephew of the Jido of Tsushima Island Lord Chimera. Unfortunately for the samurai, they are heavily outnumbered and almost all are either killed or captured. While you fight valiantly, you are overrun and left for dead, while your uncle is captured by the Mongol leader Kotal Khan. Jim Sakai is aided and nursed back to health by Yuna, a main side character throughout the game, and then sets off on a quest to rescue his uncle from Kotal Khan. These starting events set up the main game and game loop. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, so I'll just be sticking to events that take place in the first few hours, but it would be impossible to critique the game without at least setting up the plot. And this is quite a lengthy game. Completionists can expect 50 to 60 hours of playtime, if not longer, which was quite surprising to me since I wasn't really sure what to expect with this game. So, let's get this out of the way before we go any further, as I'm sure you've already heard about this. The environment is absolutely gorgeous, maybe the best looking on any platform to date. While there are some other issues graphically that I'll talk about later, nothing can take away from the work of art that Sucker Punch created. Everything moves as the wind blows and leaves fall. The environment is uniquely part of the gameplay. Instead of quest markers like in most open world games, in Ghost of Tsushima when you mark a location on the map, the wind will blow in the direction you need to go. This eliminates clutter on the screen and helps minimize the HUD. There is an incredibly strong sense of exploration. You'll find something around almost every corner on the island. While the wind is functionally the same as a map marker, its presentation is unique and adds some much needed creativity into the stagnant open world genre. Unfortunately, this experiment doesn't quite hit the mark and at times ends up being quite flawed and non-functional in certain spots on the map, but at least they tried something different. While exploring, you will find a number of activities and quite a few collectibles to the point where this game could be classified as a collectathon game. While the collectibles might have a different aesthetic than in other games, they are the same tired old open world staples that we have seen time and time again. Ghost of Tsushima could have easily been renamed Assassin's Creed Ghost, and no one would have been the wiser. Sucker Punch also made the curious choice to tie in some of the character progression to the collectibles, which from a fundamental game design perspective is a rather odd choice. For instance, there were the bamboo strikes where you had to hit a combination of buttons in rapid succession, which were pretty fun, in order to hone your sword skills. Once you complete a certain amount of bamboo strikes, your resolve meter will increase, and this was the main way to increase that meter. In most cases, your character could be severely underpowered unless you focus on all the collectibles. Not to mention, to max out your character, you basically have to finish the majority of the collectibles, so unless you completely ignore all the quests and enemy camps and do the collectibles first, you'll not really get any use out of that progression system. This game really falls under the RPG light tree, and while there is technically a leveling system, instead Sucker Punch chose to call it increasing your legend. When you hit certain tiers in your legend, you can get skill points to spend in a very generic skill tree, and eventually you unlock additional store stances. The stances felt like a gigantic missed opportunity since all they are used for is just to fight against a specific enemy weapon type. For instance, one stance will be used against swords and another against spears, and that's it. I tried experimenting by switching the stances to try and give the combat more depth, but the game quite literally paused and forced me to switch to the proper stance. For this reason, I'm not really sure why the stances are something that needs to be unlocked instead of just being part of the baseline moveset, although that could be said about almost all the unlockable skills in the skill tree. Combat feels very shallow at first and doesn't feel right until most of the moves are unlocked later on. Once everything is unlocked, there are some very cinematic moments where you'll be slicing through enemies with a finesse that is almost dance-like. Unfortunately, this is quite rare to see it happen like that and usually end up being very clunky, especially with the parrying system. Something is very off with it and it can work pretty inconsistently. Part of the problem is the 30 FPS, since having a higher frame rate can reduce input lag if the developers are too lazy to fix it themselves. But another Sony game, God of War, is 30 FPS and it features probably one of the most responsive combat systems I've ever seen. I do wish Sony held all of its studios to Sony Santa Monica's standard, but unfortunately it's unlikely that that will ever happen. Now you might be thinking the combat seems like a total mess, making the game difficult because of it. Actually, it's the complete opposite. Sucker Punch seems to be very aware of their own shortcomings, and instead of fine-tuning the combat and polishing it, they instead just overtune Jin to be so powerful that it takes any real challenge away from the game. After the first few hours, I breezed through all challenges, even the duels. If you have any resolve built up, you can use it to just heal yourself or perform special moves. Duels seemingly were supposed to be the hardest challenges in the game, but if you have some resolve built up, you can blast through them in under 5 seconds using special moves. The bosses I did have to fight fully when I had no resolve built up usually ended up being extremely easy, outside a few that would just spam unparryable attacks non-stop, making the fights just utterly obnoxious. Okay, so let's get into the story and quests. The main story, while quite short, is probably one of the stronger aspects of the game. While the actual story is pretty mediocre and absolutely derivative, it does feature some well thought out and exciting action set pieces and some very tense moments that will keep most people entertained. Fortunately, the same cannot be said about the side quests. There are a few that will stand out, but mostly they are extremely repetitive, and the story beats in each quest will follow a strict script that never changes. The one silver lining in the side quests are the ones that are specific to Jin's companions. Some were actually quite well done, and I did enjoy getting to know some of the characters along the way, although the conclusions to the majority of the quest lines were somehow rushed and unsatisfying. There were also some special side quests that will reward a special move or set of armor. From a story's perspective, they left a lot to be desired, but were worth doing for the rewards. I talked about the game being somewhat of a collectathon earlier, and outside the actual collectibles, the game has resources scattered everywhere across the world. You can use these resources to upgrade your armor and weapons, and will need to wander around every camp and town, checking every nook and cranny to find enough to upgrade your gear. The supplies were literally just lying around in random spots, and it got extremely tedious after a while to gather them up. The supplies are literally just lying in random spots, and it got very tedious after a short time to gather them. Sometimes the resources will be awarded for doing quests, clearing bandit camps, and killing enemies, but if you want to upgrade your gear, you'll have to run aimlessly around the camps looking for supplies. Very odd game design for this style of game, and it really just didn't click with the gameplay. Trophy hunters, you'll be relieved to know that there are no missable trophies, although be ready to gather almost every collectible in the game. It took me roughly 45 hours to get to platinum, and it was very repetitive and tedious, so if you plan on going for it, be ready for a slog. And now we have to address the pink fox in the room. Microtransactions, or rather, the lack of them. I'm not giving points to Sucker Punch for doing what every game developer should do in a single-player game, but despite the quality of the game, it was just so nice to have a single-player experience without having to worry about a season pass, battle pass, DLC, or microtransaction content. Players will just be able to buy the game, and that's it. They can access all the content in the game through gameplay and not have to keep opening their wallet. It's sad that I even have to mention all this, but that's where we are in gaming nowadays. So it might seem like I've been piling on about Ghost of Tsushima in this review, and that is somewhat correct. The game needed more time in the oven and is missing a layer of polish in almost every aspect. The writing was extremely derivative and at times just blatantly stole from the things that inspired it. There were some fundamentally odd and poor choices in the gameplay department, and the combat could be very clunky at times. Not to mention, the game does not contain any content that we haven't seen before. Everything in it has been taken from other games and done worse in most cases. Despite all that, it's not a bad game. There's nothing original about it, but there's also nothing overly wrong with it. It's certainly not a good game, but it's not a bad one either. It's average, and I'll be giving Ghost of Tsushima a 6 out of 10. Yes, the environmental graphics are pretty at times, but pretty graphics don't magically make the gameplay good or polished. I think this is a good template to work from for a sequel, or possibly retooling it with more of a mythological theme. It will require extensive work to make the sequel better, but I do hope Sucker Punch puts some more effort into the next one, because it could turn out to be an excellent game if they do so. It's pretty clear that the studio had very little experience with this style of gameplay, so hopefully they can grow and learn from the experience. While I didn't completely feel ripped off buying this game for full price, I would strongly suggest waiting for a deep sale, at least 50% off. Like I said earlier, there's nothing original about the game, and almost every mechanic you'll see in it was taken from other games. That doesn't mean it's not worth playing. Not everything can be God of War or Witcher 3. Ghost of Tsushima is just a straight up average game that has some flaws, but nothing that will ruin the gameplay experience. I do want to mention there's a multiplayer coming to the game, but at time of writing that's a few months away, so I can't really comment on if that will add to the experience or not, but I may make an impressions video when that comes out. Anyways, thanks for watching the video. If you did enjoy it, please subscribe and be sure to like the video. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next video.